I did a test ride on the KTM 690 Enduro a few months back, and I'm sure those of you that saw it will remember I came away feeling kind of unimpressed. But so many of you have commented that I got it wrong, that I didn't know that I was talking about, that the 690 Enduro is the perfect unicorn bike, that I decided to give it another chance, put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, so I committed to riding the Colorado BDR on a rented KTM 690 Enduro, and I just got back from that trip yesterday. The trip was a week long and was originally going to span about 1,100 miles. I only ended up doing about 800 miles on the bike for reasons that we'll discuss in a moment. But we covered some of the highest and most technical passes in America, as well as an hour or more on the freeway and various twisty highways up and down paved mountain passes. So was I right about the 690 all along? Well, the answer is always as complicated, so let's talk about it. Before we jump in, I just want to say thank you to the sponsor for this video, Break Free. First up, some specs about the KTM 690 Enduro, so we're on the same page as far as what we're talking about. The KTM 690 Enduro R is a liquid-cooled, single-cylinder 692cc engine with a 6-speed transmission. It has a WP Explorer Pro suspension setup on the front and rear with 9.8 inches of suspension travel. The seat height is 36.5 inches. It has 10.5 inches of clearance. It weighs 326 pounds dry, 354-ish pounds wet. It has a 3.5 gallon fuel tank, and the MSRP on the KTM 690 Enduro R is $12,999 US. The other thing to know, you've probably already seen it in the pictures, is that this is a dual sport bike. It is not an adventure bike, despite being a 690cc engine. First up, the good. What do I like about this bike? Well, it feels exactly like a DRZ, a 300L, or any other kind of heavyish dual sport off-road. It's very light, very confidence-inspiring. I attacked every obstacle with confidence and at speed. I was having a much easier time than everyone else on the Colorado BDR on the hard parts, except for maybe Wally, who was riding a CRF 300L Rally. This bike gets better the faster you ride it. It's an amazing fast gravel bike, and it crushes technical sections without slowing down. It can handle just about anything at speed. It is very, very good off-road. It has a better suspension than pretty much any other dual sport I've ever ridden. The seat height is pretty tall, but it's manageable even for someone with a short inseam. My inseam is about 30 inches. I was continually impressed by how easy it was to get on and off, and for me to get my foot down at stop. Now on this trip I wasn't carrying any luggage, so that makes a big difference in terms of being able to swing my leg over, but it was not too tall to manage even for someone with a shorter inseam. The suspension is unbelievably good. I could not bottom it out, and I had the compression turned all the way down. I aired this bike out 20, 30 times on this trip. Not one time did it bottom out. I was attacking like big chunky rocky sections at 25, 30 miles an hour. No issues with the suspension. You can add a ton of luggage and gear because, like I said, I didn't even have this bike cranked down, and I weigh probably 100 pounds more than the rider it's designed for, and there's a ton of adjustability. It's really, really good suspension, if a little stiff, which we'll talk about in the cons section. It has a sort of bare bones, simple exterior, not a lot of plastic bodywork, which means the engine is easy to get to, and mounting luggage is a snap. The TKC 80s are actually some of the best stock tires I've ever used. I would actually keep them on the bike until they wore out, which is not something I ever say. I almost always say just get new tires immediately, but the TKC 80s are pretty good. The aftermarket for this bike is robust because it's been around for a long time. You could go a bare bones, minimal, ultralight off-road setup, or go all the way in the other direction and add a rally tower and a bigger tank and turn it into a true cross-country hybrid adventure bike. And did I mention how fun it is to ride this thing fast off-road? It is insanely fun. In just about every condition, not just on flat gravel roads, but on the gnarliest stuff at the top of the highest mountain passes in Colorado. Still fun to just blaze right up that. The mid, so this is like things that aren't good or bad, they're just different. And primarily that is the rear gas tank. It takes a little getting used to getting off and fueling the bike from the rear. It's the first bike I've had with a rear fuel tank, but it is nice to have that weight on the back wheel when you need traction. Although the flip side to that is you have way less weight on the front when you need that traction to steer up there. So proper body position and really getting forward over the front, sitting forward on the seat and leaning forward when you're standing up is pretty important on that bike. It does make it difficult to go with certain luggage setups because you have to get to that fuel tank in the rear, but many brands account for it by putting a hole in their harnesses. Moscow does that, Tusk does that, so you don't have to take the bag off to get gas into the tank. And you don't need to take off your tank bag when you're refueling, so that opens the door to a lot more tank bag options because you don't need something that's quick on and off. You never have to take it off to put gas in, unlike pretty much every other bike. Now before we jump jump into what I didn't like about this bike, I want to take a second to say thank you to the sponsor of this video, and that is Brake Free. So as I mentioned, we did a ton of highway miles and quite a bit of freeway on the first day getting out of Denver, and on the back of my helmet the whole time was the Brake Free light system. So this system could not be simpler because it's driven by an accelerometer. So if you slow down, it knows you slowed down whether you hit the brakes or not. Your taillights on your bike are small and low, and there was a guy on this trip, Marcus, on a KTM 500 EXCF with an integrated taillight turn signal that was barely visible. So you get something like this on the back of your helmet that puts it up right in the driver's eye line, and when you slow down, they know, and you don't have to deal with looking in your rearview mirror, puckering your butthole, and hoping that they don't crash into you at a stoplight. This thing tells the drivers behind you what's going on all the time. It is not expensive. It is really easy to use. No app, no connecting it to your bike. It just uses an accelerometer, and the battery lasts forever. I've used it on a week-long trip and not charged it once. So it attaches to the back of your helmet with this mount here. Comes off that easy, goes back on just like that. Highly recommend the Brake Free. I'll put a link to that in the description for you, and you can use my link and save 10 bucks off the cost of one of these bad boys, which could save your life. So probably a good investment, money well spent. All right, let's talk about what I don't like about the KTM 690, and you might want to grab a drink, have a seat, because it's a long list. First thing to complain about is the most obvious, and that is the price. It is $13,000. That is very, 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 very expensive for a dual sport bike. You have to really, really want one of these if you're gonna drop that kind of money. You can find a used one cheaper, but then you're rolling the dice on KTM reliability. The ABS turning on and off and the traction control turning on and off controls are annoying AF. Finally got ABS to where I could do it consistently, but you have to start the bike, roll forward about 10 feet, stop, and then hold down the button to shut it off. I had to do that every time we stopped. When you're riding by yourself, maybe it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but in a group, basically, okay, we're gonna go, and I would roll forward and then stop to turn it off, and everyone passes me, and it's off, and then I go and catch up. I could not get the traction control thing to work consistently at all. I finally just stopped turning it off. That could just be a quirk of this bike. I will say the bike that I rode had 1 mile on it when I got on it, so it was brand new, but just know the TC switch is inconsistent at best. The bright side there is that it's only cornering traction control, so all it does is stop you from power sliding out. It doesn't cut the power when you're trying to climb a hill or spin the tire in the sand. The turn signals fell off. Both of them fell off my bike multiple times. It's a quick release, obviously, because it's meant to be breakaway, but once it breaks away once, they won't stay in. I would put it in, ride 5 miles, it was gone again. We had another 690 on the trip that Bree rode for half a day, like 3 hours. One of hers fell off too. They just will not stay on. It's a terrible design. I had it gorilla taped on at the end of the trip. This bike is not comfortable for long stretches on the highway. That's not a shocker, but I definitely thought it would be better. So somehow my knees are even with the seat. Like the foot pegs are super high. I don't know. So that's uncomfortable because my legs are in an uncomfortable position because my hip flexors are kind of pushed upward more than I'm used to on a bike where my feet are kind of underneath me. The stock seat is terrible. It's barely tolerable. It's better than like a true dirt bike seat, but not by a lot. It's at least wider, but it's very thin. There is no wind protection, which is better to me than buffeting. I would rather be in the naked air than be in the wind buffeting coming off the top of a crappy windscreen. But if you get a good windscreen, it's a lot more comfortable on the highway. This thing vibrates like crazy. Your hands will go numb. If I had one of these, I would probably put flex bars on it right away to try to eat some of that up. If you're going 75 miles an hour on the freeway, your hand will go numb and there is no cruise control. Probably my biggest complaint with this bike while we're in the cons is the power delivery. And the fact that until you get high into the rev range, there is no power at all. It's exactly like my KTM 390 Enduro R. There's no torque low in the rev range. There is no tractor factor. You have to keep the engine revved high to have enough power, which can be problematic off-road. It stalled out on me on a tight switchback on the BDR where I kind of got stopped and then tried to take off again. It died and I had to roll backward 10 feet while the front tire just slid. It was not awesome. Maybe I'm just used to my Japanese thumpers and the twin cylinder ADV bikes I ride a lot. Like I'll admit that's primarily what I have experience with, but I was constantly in the wrong gear and just shifting way more than normal on this bike. You're either in the power band, dealing with uncomfortable vibrations, or you upshift and you have no power when you need it. And I think what annoys me the most about this issue is that I know it doesn't have to be this way. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a mechanic, but why does a DR650 have a ton of low-end power, but this KTM 690 doesn't? There's some engineering choice there I'm not understanding. Again, I'm not an engineer, but it just doesn't jive well with my riding style. I spent the whole last day on the Cobder when we were doing the Alpine loop, just revving the piss out of it with my right hand and just using the clutch to stay in the power band because I could not climb otherwise, even in first gear. The gears are too tall, it's street geared, and then you got to get the revs up to get any power anyway. I was just not loving it on the difficult stuff. That's my biggest complaint about this bike, and the reason why I don't think I love it, because when it counts, like, you bought this bike so it would be good off-road, and it's good at everything except giving you power when you need it most. A few other complaints: the dash is pretty useless. There's not a lot of information there. If I owned one of these, I would definitely just get a Trail Tech and put it on there right away. The bike is not very user-friendly, and I don't think it's great for new riders because that power delivery is so inconsistent. So if you've built up the ability to react and deal with unexpected things on the motorcycle over years of experience, that's one thing. It's another if you're just learning to ride and you start revving the bike up and all of a sudden you get a lot more power out of nowhere as it gets high into the rev range. I just don't think that's great for new riders. They need to be on a bike with a more linear power delivery. The suspension is great, like fantastic for aggressive riding, but it is stiff as hell. Not at all plush. You feel every bump in the road no matter how you adjust it. And I know because I literally took all the compression out of the front shock and I was still just getting bounced everywhere, my teeth rattling out of my head. Comfort is not a word that has ever been whispered near this motorcycle. It's not comfortable. The exhaust is on the wrong side, which I didn't think would be that annoying, but I was constantly catching myself leaning up against it. I melted one of the pouches on my Ape Cat harness on this trip because I often lean up against the low side of the bike. That's where you stand because that's where you get on. That's the habit you've developed, but I almost melted holes in my gear so many times, and apparently it's like even hotter than normal because the catalytic converter is in the pipe at the end. I don't know about that specifically. That's just what somebody said. So my final conclusion, and yeah, there was a lot more negative than positive there. Let's talk about it. What do I think about this bike at the end of a week on it? Well, we talk about the unicorn a lot in the ADV world. All we want is a bike that can crush 1,000 miles comfortably and then jump on Black Diamond single track trails when we get there. Is that too much to ask? So is the 690 the unicorn? Well, it definitely checks a lot of the boxes. It is both extremely off-road capable and all-day freeway capable. But the key word there is capable. I did not say comfortable. It is all-day freeway capable. It is nowhere near all-day freeway comfortable. In my test ride video, I talked about how I originally thought the 690 would be the best of both worlds, with all the highway advantages of a big ADV bike and all the off-road capability of a dual sport. It turns out I was half right. It does have all the off-road capability of a dual sport if you discount the power delivery and gearing, but it has almost none of the on-road advantages of an ADV bike aside from power. The 690 Enduro R is a dual sport. It's a very powerful dual sport, but it is a dual sport nonetheless. On the highway, it feels pretty much the same as a DRZ or a 300L, just with the power to cruise comfortably at 75 with more power left for passing. I will tell you this, my original plan was to ride this bike 6 days on the Colorado BDR, and then on the last day we were going to ride back to Denver. It was like 300 miles, 6 hours of riding. The prospect of sitting on that bike for another 6 hours on the highway was so unappealing to me that I weaseled my way into riding back in the van with the tour director instead of riding my motorcycle all the way back to Denver. I really did not want to be on it on the freeway all day. If ultimate off-road capability is your priority, and you also want to be able to ride long distances on the highway without getting passed by semis, well then this could be the bike for you. Just know that you're not going to enjoy the highway miles at all unless you spend a bunch of money on upgrades. The 690 Enduro R is a dual sport. It's a dual sport that costs $13,000. That's more than a new Tenere 700 or a Touareg 660. You can just get a lot more bike with a lot more features for the same money. If you just want off-road capability and aren't planning on doing hours on the highway, well, there are much cheaper dual sports that'll do just as well when you leave the pavement. So I guess it's a great bike for a very specific rider. If you want to ride freeways and single track, well, there's pretty much nothing else. But if you're not going to be on the gnarliest off-road trails, a Tenere, Ibex, or Touareg provide a lot more on-road comfort while sacrificing just a little bit of off-road capability. Hell, aside from a smaller fuel tank and a bit more weight, the 390 Enduro R and Adventure R pretty much do everything just as well as the 690 Enduro R, but they cost half as much. I really enjoyed riding the 690, and I can definitely see the appeal for a certain kind of rider. I'm not saying those of you that love this bike are wrong. I understand, I see it. I'm very glad that this is the bike that I was on when we hit the toughest parts of the Colorado BDR. I sailed up things effortlessly that the guys on the big ADV bikes struggled with. The suspension is probably the best I've ever experienced on a dual sport, period. With the exception maybe of the KTM 500 EXCF, which costs just as much. This thing really is ready to go right out of the box. No upgrades needed other than a skid plate, because one of the cons that I forgot to mention is that it has a plastic skid plate, but that's not uncommon for a factory bike. Hell, you don't even have to swap out the stock tires on this thing, and I never say that. I just feel like for my purposes, I personally would rather be on a cheaper, more reliable bike with more low-end power and just deal with being a little slower on the freeway. If I'm gonna spend this much money, it's gonna be on a KTM 500 EXCF, which is not really that much less comfortable on the freeway or the highway at highway speeds. It has the power, it's vibrating, maybe a little bit more vibrating, but it's also 100 pounds less weight. So you could spend half as much and get a pretty capable bike, or spend the same amount and get a way more capable bike with much better power delivery in the 500 EXCF. I'm not a 690 hater. I had a great time on it. I'm glad it's the bike I was on. You know, it crushed everything I threw at it. It's not a bike that I would personally purchase over a well-equipped adventure bike or a cheaper, lighter dual sport. So let me know, what did I get wrong about the KTM 690 Enduro? Leave that in the comments below. I'm sure you're going to, one way or the other. Have you ridden one of these? What do you think about it? Thanks once again to Break Free for sponsoring this video. I will put a link in the description for you so you can pick up one yourself and maximize your safety while riding on the road, no matter what bike you're on. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. A thank you.
Excellent!